Hi, I'm Shmuel Moshe, and this is the Weekly Parashahcast. In this show, we go over the different weekly Torah portions, and as we read them, go over my own personal interpretations of what the text means, as well as some relevant comparisons throughout our history and knowledge. Before I begin, we are getting into the third Torah portion, Lech Lecha, which is chapter 12 onward of Genesis, coming off the heels of Parashat Noach last week. With that in mind, before I begin, I also want to quickly remind everyone, I am not a Torah scholar, certainly not by trade anyhow. I am just somebody who wished to study Torah. Let's begin. First up, Lech Lecha. What does it mean? The translation means go or go forth, as we will hear in this story. Let it begin. Genesis chapter 12. Lech Lecha. And the Lord said to Abram, Go forth from your land, and from your birthplace, and from your father's house, to the land that I will show you. And I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will aggrandize your name, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you. And Abram went, as the Lord had spoken to him, and Lot went with him. And Abram was 75 years old when he left Haran. And Abram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had acquired, and the souls they had acquired in Haran. And they went to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. And Abram passed through the land, until the place of Shechem, until the plain of Moreh, and the Canaanites were then in the land. And the Lord appeared to Abram, and he said, To your seed I will give this land. And there he built an altar to the Lord, who had appeared to him. And he moved from there to the mountain, east of Bethel, and he pitched his tent. Bethel was to the west, and Ai was to the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord, and he called in the name of the Lord. And Abram traveled, continually traveling southward. And there was a famine in the land, and Abram descended to Egypt to sojourn there, because the famine was severe in the land. Now it came to pass, when he drew near to come to Egypt, that he said to Sarai his wife, Behold now, I know that you are a woman of fair appearance. And it will come to pass, when the Egyptians see you, that they will say, This is his wife, and they will slay me, and let you live. Please say you are my sister, in order that it go well with me because of you, and that my soul may live because of you. All right, and that concludes the first portion. So a few things. First off, the initial go forth. This is essentially, think of this like the start of an adventure in the context of the beginning of someone's journey. Go forth from the land. And with this quest in mind, indeed he does so. There are promises made. You'll be a great nation. You'll be blessed. Your name will become huge. You'll be a blessing. I'll bless those who bless you. Curse those who curse you. All the families of the earth shall be blessed in you. Now that particular statement is the one that has me most curious. All the families of the earth shall be blessed in you. What does that mean? I'm not 100% sure, honestly. I would like to know more about that particular phrase. All the families shall be blessed in you. And I think of this in two different ways. Either, over time, all the families will eventually be connected to him because of the way genealogy works, or in working with him and revering him as a person who is blessed, then by doing so and blessing him, they themselves will be blessed in him. I'm not 100% sure, but that's just a quick explanation I can think of. Now, this guy is 75 years old when he leaves, so this is not some young fella. He's already lived for 75 years. That's, in modern days, someone at the age 75, they've pretty much lived their entire life already, yet this is, for Abram, quite possibly the most important time of his entire life. This is the time that will lead to the most significant events. So, very significant, I think, that a lot of these characters in the biblical context, they are not young when they experience these things. They are not young at all. They're quite aged. They are sagacious, if you will. They're older fellas. I think it's extremely typical and common for our Western sensibilities to really glorify youthful vigor. The heroes are always the young guy, and the old guy is somebody who's just a sage with good advice, or maybe a wizard. For example, they might be a great wizard who tells them some information, but never the hero themselves. So this is interesting to me, just to acknowledge that our patriarchs in the Torah are typically much older when things happen. Now, also, he leaves with his nephew Lot, as well as everything that he's made, and of course his wife and their journey, being told, you're going to inherit the land of Canaan, and creating a little location, Bethel, which is kind of the house of God, is kind of the translation of that, Bethel, where El dwells, Bet, or Beit, and El being one of the classic names of the creator of the universe, right? Elohim, El, so Bethel, house of God. So also a loose idea of where this is located. Bethel was to the west, Ai was to the east. He built an altar in between them where he pitched his tent and called on the name of the Lord. So when he goes south, because of the famine, he ends up in Egypt, and he does something very clever here. He knows that because he's got a beautiful wife, his life is in danger, right? Because if her husband's dead, then she's single. So instead, he gets the clever idea, wife, say that I'm your brother, and not only will I live, but because they want to earn your favor, I'll be treated well. So this is his strategy here. Say that you are my sister in order that it go well with me because of you, and that my soul may live because of you. So here we know he's a very, very wise fellow and very shrewd on what needs to be done in order to secure his survival in this land. One last note, but we see the relationship with Egypt is very prominent all throughout the Old Testament, and we are seeing it right now. This may be the first time Egypt is named by name, Mitzrayim, right, would be the Hebrew, but Egypt is a very important place in the ancient world, and it's certainly important in our traditions here too. Now we move on to the second portion, chapter 12 of Genesis, starting with verse 14. And it came to pass when Abram came to Egypt that the Egyptians saw the woman, that she was very pretty. And Pharaoh's princes saw her, and they praised her to Pharaoh, and the woman was taken to the house of Pharaoh. And he benefited Abram for her sake, and he had flocks and cattle, and he-donkeys, and men-servants, and maidservants, and she-donkeys, and camels. And the Lord plagued Pharaoh great plagues, as well as his household, on account of Sarai, Abram's wife. And Pharaoh summoned Abram, and he said, What is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister, so that I took her to myself for a wife? And now here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh commanded men on his behalf, and they escorted him and his wife and all that was his. Chapter 13. And Abram came up from Egypt, he and his wife and all that was his, and Lot with him to the south. And Abram was very heavy with cattle, with silver, and with gold. And he went on his journeys from the south until Bethel, until the place where his tent had been previously, between Bethel and between Ai, to the place of the altar that he had made at first. And Abram called there in the name of the Lord. So here we see at the end of the second portion, Abram was completely right. He knew that his wife would be favored, and sure enough, the princes of Egypt took her to meet the Pharaoh. So he wanted to have her as a wife. Of course, he was making his move, and he indeed, as Abram had conspired, gave all sorts of good things to Abram for being her brother. However, this is a very, very taboo relationship, considering she is already married, and this brings plague upon Pharaoh's house. Now, to be fair to Pharaoh, he really didn't know any better. And I feel pretty bad for him in the situation that he got caught up in all this. I mean, he gave this gift, these gifts, plural, and he was set up, really. I mean, it was all set up. Now, this is what he gets for trying to take her as his woman, but at the same time, is that really such a problem if she's single? It's a bit of an unfair circumstance where he was, later there will be something that is written in later parts of the people have heard this before. Don't put a stumbling block before the blind. That doesn't always mean a literal stumbling block in front of a blind person. Pharaoh did not know that she was married, and this would be a very good example of a stumbling block before Pharaoh. But nonetheless, the plagues do come to an end, and he sends off Abram with the bounty as well. Worth noting, he basically tells him, get out of here. Just scram. So there are consequences that are not so apparent that, they got sent away, so they lost their ability to sojourn in the land. But on the flip side, you could consider this action, because it was favorable and benefited Abram, it probably had some immediate penalty, but then benefit for Pharaoh in the notion of blessings and curses and gifts and things like that. Because Pharaoh was so good to this prophet, the representative of the God, surely there were some rewards for him for being so cordial, even after being deceived like that. Returning from Egypt, he goes back to where he had set up his tent, back to that altar he built, and calls out to the Lord. I think it's significant that he has really established this altar as an important place, so we can just imagine that there must be some significance to this spot that has a sort of a pathway to access the Lord. Portion 3, chapter 13, Genesis, verse 5. And also Lot, who went with Abram, had flocks and cattle and tents. And the land did not bear them to dwell together, for their possessions were many, and they could not dwell together. And there was a quarrel between the herdsmen of Abram's cattle and between the herdsmen of Lot's cattle. And the Canaanites and the Perizzites were then dwelling in the land. And Abram said to Lot, Please, let there be no quarrel between me and between you, and between my herdsmen and between your herdsmen, for we are kinsmen. Is not all the land before you? Please, part from me. If left, I will go right. If right, I will go left. And Lot raised his eyes, and he saw the entire plain of the Jordan, that it was entirely watered, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you come to Zoar. And Lot chose for himself the entire plain of the Jordan, and Lot traveled from the east, and they parted from one another. Abram dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and he pitched his tents until Sodom. And the people of Sodom were very evil and sinful against the Lord. And the Lord said unto Abram, after Lot had parted from him, Please raise your eyes and see, from the place where you are, northward and southward and eastward and westward. For all the land that you see I will give to you and to your seed to eternity. And I will make your seed like the dust of the earth, so that if a man will be able to count the dust of the earth, so will your seed be counted. Rise, walk in the land to its length, and to its breadth, for I will give it to you. And Abram pitched his tents, and he came, and he dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and there he built an altar to the Lord. So something really, really beautiful about this sequence, this third portion, it's about the eventual breakup of traveling together between Abram and his nephew Lot. Now, the way this goes, there's just simply too much that they both have, and because they're dwelling amongst each other, there are some skirmishes with their underlings, right? The herdsmen who are taking care of their cattle are running into some issues. And so Abram, recognizing that this is going to be a bigger problem in the future, he just realizes, I need to just make a clean break from my nephew. But he does so in a very respectful and honorable way. He comes forth and just outright says, I don't want there to be any problem between us or for the people that work for us. So here's the deal. You pick. Left or right, whichever one you pick, I'll go the other way. This is significant to me because this wisdom, there's no bad blood. And it also shows that Abram is not making a power play here. He simply wants to split them up, but he is letting Lot choose which part goes to whom. This is significant. Again, introducing the idea of them parting ways could really be seen as very painful, and it can also come across as, are you trying to pull a fast one on me? Now keep in mind, we already know that Abram is a very shrewd man. He's very, very considerate of things like this. After all, why did he have his wife say that she wasn't his wife but his sister? He sees the big picture, and he also has the ability of foresight over what could go wrong. So by telling Lot we should split up, but I'm letting you pick which land goes to you, that gives his nephew completely good faith on the breakup. You chose the way you're going, therefore I'm not imposing on you. I will simply go whichever way you don't go. So a very good decision on his part, and absolutely will maintain their relationship on peaceful and good terms. A very diplomatic choice. Now, the land that Lot ends up choosing, the Jordan, right, the entire plain of the Jordan, it's described as being really good land, fertile land, described compared to Egypt and compared to even Eden. So this is a great plot that he's chosen here. This plain is fantastic to live on. So that just gives some context. But also we learn about Sodom and Gomorrah, especially about, this is where he's going, but these two places are particularly wicked. And of course, as many of us know, this will come up again in the future. But for now, be mindful, that's where he's going, and the conditions are very good. Now from here, this is where they split up, and as Abram returns and looks around, basically he receives another prophecy, a promise. He says, look out and see in every direction. All of this will belong to your descendants. And not just that, they will be so numerous that if one was to count the dust, that's how many people will be your descendants. So going back to that thing earlier that families will be blessed in you, I think that's also another way to kind of consider that, right? Because as I mentioned, the genealogy of people with a common ancestor, they have that blood as well to inherit as a blessing. So with that and all going forward, he's got the good promises of what's to come and of a very large future. He builds another altar in the name of the Lord. Very significant is not just the consecration of holy sites to build these altars, which we have loose locations of, but the fact that Abram is clever enough to consistently build things like this and honor the one who's making all these promises. It doesn't hurt to put in some good work with the big guy. Fourth portion, Genesis chapter 14, verse 1. Now it came to pass in the days of Amraphel, the king of Shinar, Arioch, the king of Eleasar, Chedorlaomer, the king of Elam, and Tidal, the king of Goyim, that they waged war with Bera, the king of Sodom, and with Birsha, the king of Gomorrah, Shineab, the king of Admah, and Shemeber, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar. All these joined in the valley of Siddim, which is the Dead Sea. For 12 years they served Chedorlaomer, and for 13 years they rebelled. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer came, and the kings who were with him, and they smote the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, and the Zuzim in Ham, and the Emim in Shaveh Kiritaim, and the Horites in their mountain Seir, until the plain of Paran, which is alongside the desert. And they returned and came to Ein Mishpat, which is Kadesh, and they smote the entire field of Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in Hazezon Tamar. And the king of Sodom, and the king of Gomorrah, and the king of Admah, and the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, which is Zoar, came forth, and they engaged them in battle in the valley of Siddim. With Chedorlaomer the king of Elam, and Tidal the king of Goyim, and Amraphel the king of Shinar, and Arioch the king of Elasar, 4 kings against the 5. Now the valley of Siddim was composed of many clay pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, and they fell there, and the survivors fled to a mountain. And they took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah, and all their food, and they departed. And they took Lot and his possessions, the son of Abram's brother, and they departed, and he was living in Sodom. And the fugitive came, and he told Abram the Hebrew, and he was living in the plain of Mamre, the Amorite, the brother of Eshcol and the brother of Aner, who were Abram's confederates. And Abram heard that his kinsmen had been taken captive, and he armed his trained men, those born in his house, 318, and he pursued until dawn. And he divided himself against them at night, he and his servants, and smote them, and pursued them until Hobah, which is to the left of Damascus. And he restored all the possessions, and also Lot his brother, and his possessions he restored, and also the women and the people. And the king of Sodom came out toward him after his return from smiting Chedorlaomer, and the kings who were with him, to the valley of Shaveh, which is the valley of the king. And Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest to the Most High God. And he blessed him, and he said, Blessed be Abram to the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth. And blessed be the Most High God, who has delivered your adversaries into your hand. And he gave him a tithe from all. So, some context here. This is a pretty significant battle of 2 warring groups, 2 factions, if you will, of 5 kings and 4 kings. They go to battle, and the place where they met in battle did not have very good land, and the people who were fighting on behalf of the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, those kings lost. The circumstances end up with them fleeing and failing to flee, dying in battle, and then those who do manage to survive escaping into the mountains. So everything in Sodom and Gomorrah basically become booty. They become loot for the winning party, right? So they take everything and then they leave. Now, among them, as we mentioned before, Lot lives there, so Lot is unfortunately one of the many victims of this conquest. And so what ends up happening, Abram finds out about what went down, and where he's living, he's got a nice little army that he's building himself. These are people who are basically living under him as his workers, his servants, right? This is the house of Abram. So his people are now essentially a capable fighting force. So they pursue and they attack at night. They overtake the enemy, and they manage to defeat them as well as reclaim what was taken. He also is able to rescue Lot from his captors and restore all the stuff that was taken from him, as well as the women and the people. So all of the prisoners that were taken in this raid, they are restored to their homelands. So this is the action of a liberator. And again, he comes because they came to him, and he's going to, of course, look after his nephew. So all this, again, remember the bond that they share is very significant. He looks out for his nephew. He brought him with him to this place, and he cares very much about their relationship, obviously. So from here, they also, it seems, have appointed new kings in place of the ones that died, because it does acknowledge the king of Sodom came out toward him. We already heard previously that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah had fled and that they'd fallen. So this must be the new king, just for context, in case that's a little confusing. I thought the king fell. Then why is there a king here? It must be the next king of Sodom. And they meet in Shaveh, which is the Valley of the King, and they have a little bit of a moment here. So Melchizedek, the king of Salem, brought out bread and wine, and he was a priest to the Most High God. Significant here, this is a person who isn't Abram, but who reveres the Most High God. Bet-El, right? El, the house of God. So we can assume this Most High God, El, who we have different names for, is the same God. This man is a priest for that God. And with these blessings, blessed be Abram to the Most High God who possesses heaven and earth. So we see that the presence of the God of Abraham exists beyond just Abraham. Others know of this God. In other words, this God has made himself known to more than just Abram. However, Abram is the one with whom his covenant will be formed, as we'll talk about in a bit. So he receives the blessing from this priest of the Most High God, and he also receives a tithe from all. That basically means he gets an offering. Now, the fact that this is happening also in the Valley of the King is pretty significant. I would say that it really elevates the status of Abram as an individual. He is being recognized for his deeds by all of the kings that are with the king of Sodom, including this king of Salem. And so this is a really big deal. The equivalent of a holy banquet being in Abram's honor, as well as a reward for his duty and service to these people, this really shows the significance of this man in the eyes of those outside of his own tribe. Fifth portion, Genesis chapter 14, verse 21. And the kings of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the souls and the possessions take for yourself." And Abram said to the king of Sodom, "I raise my hand to the Lord, the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth. Neither from a thread to a shoestrap, nor will I take from whatever is yours, that you should not say, I have made Abram wealthy. Exclusive of what the lads ate, and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, they shall take their share." Chapter 15, verse 1. After these incidents, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision, saying, "Fear not, Abram, I am your shield. Your reward is exceedingly great." And Abram said, "O Lord, what will you give me, since I am going childless, and the steward of my household is Eliezer of Damascus?" And Abram said, "Behold, you have given me no seed, and behold, one of my household will inherit me." And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, saying, "This one will not inherit you, but the one who will spring from your innards, he will inherit you." And he took him outside, and he said, "Please look heavenward, and count the stars, if you are able to count them." And he said to him, "So will be your seed." And he believed in the Lord, and he counted it to him as righteousness. So first up, we have the after effect of the successful reclaiming of those who were taken. The king says, "Give me the souls, take the possession." So in other words, the king says, "You can take all the treasure, just give me back the people." But Abram says, "I raise my hand to the Lord, the Most High God, who possesses heaven and earth." He swears, "I will not take any of it that's yours, that you should not say, I have made Abram wealthy." In other words, he will not let this person be his benefactor, because then he will be able to say, "Ah, yes, Abram, I made that guy rich. It's because of me. I am Abram's benefactor." So, no, The benefactor is the one he worships, the Most High God. That is his benefactor. So he has no need for these treasures, and he raises his hand. This could even be as much as saying, I swear before the Lord, I'm not going to take any of it, that you can be able to say, I made Abram wealthy. So again, here we see the short-term versus long-term shrewdness of Abram. He sees a bigger picture. It would be totally reasonable for him to accept the reward for having done this great deed, but no. And so, exclusives of what the lads ate and the share of the men who went with me, Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre, they shall take their share. So in other words, he lets one thing be the exception. The amount that he already ate, or that they already ate for this banquet, right? And that which the guys who assisted him, his compatriots, they also get their share, but Abram himself, I'm not taking any of it. So again, this is just a really significant part of his personality that helps keep him in good favor with many people and also not be ingratiated to anyone or owe anyone a favor. By having refused the king's offer, if anything, the king now still owes him kind of a debt because he didn't take anything more than what was just already given, the food, right? So he's got his lot cast with God. All right, so now chapter 15, fear not, Abram, I am your shield, your reward is exceedingly great. But then we hear about what it is that Abram is really most concerned about as a person. He has no successor. He has no children. Despite all these things and this greatness that he's achieved, he has no son. Nobody to inherit his house. And so it's looking like it's going to be Eliezer of Damascus. The steward of his house is going to get everything because he himself has no heir apparent. But the Lord tells him, no. Look to the sky and count the stars. That will be how many children you have. It will be a child of you, your own child. And it says here, the final line of the portion, he believed in the Lord, and he accounted it to him as righteous. Now, Abraham believed in the Lord. That's the first he. So I could rephrase it as, and Abraham believed in the Lord, and the Lord accounted it to him as righteousness. So in other words, because Abram believed in what was said and did not question faithlessly what was being said, for this he is accounted righteousness. This is just another reason to say, you know what, this guy Abram only continues to impress me. And these qualities of faithful devotion and faithfulness will continue to benefit him. Now we move into the sixth portion. Chapter 15 of Genesis, verse 7. And he said to him, I am the Lord who brought you forth from Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit it. And he said, O Lord God, how will I know that I will inherit it? And he said to him, Take from me 3 heifers and 3 goats and 3 rams and a turtle dove and a young bird. And he took for him all these, and he divided them in the middle, and he placed each part opposite its mate, but he did not divide the birds. And the birds of prey descended upon the carcasses, and Abram drove them away. Now the sun was ready to set, and a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and behold, a fright, a great darkness was falling upon him. And he said to Abram, You shall surely know that your seed will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and they will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. And also the nation that they will serve will I judge, and afterwards they will go forth with great possessions. But you will come to your forefathers in peace. You will be buried in a good old age. And the 4th generation will return here, for the iniquity of the Amorites will not be complete until then. Now it came to pass that the sun had set, and it was dark, and behold, a smoking furnace and a firebrand which passed between these parts. On that day the Lord formed a covenant with Abram, saying, To your seed I have given this land, from the river of Egypt until the great river, the Euphrates River, the Kenites, and the Kenizzites, and the Kadmonites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Rephaim, and the Amorites, and the Canaanites, and the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. Chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not borne to him, and she had an Egyptian handmaid named Hagar. And Sarai said to Abram, Behold now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing. Please come to my handmaid. Perhaps I will be built up from her. And Abram hearkened to Sarai's voice. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her handmaid, at the end of 10 years of Abram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, and she gave her to Abram her husband for a wife. And he came to Hagar, and she conceived, and she saw that she was pregnant, and her mistress became unimportant in her eyes. And Sarai said to Abram, May my injustice be upon you. I gave my handmaid into your bosom, and she saw that she had become pregnant, and I became unimportant in her eyes. May the Lord judge between me and you. And Abram said to Sarai, Here is your handmaid in your hand. Do to her that which is proper in your eyes. And Sarai afflicted her, and she fled from before her. And an angel of the Lord found her by a water fountain in the desert, by the fountain on the road to Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's servant, where are you coming from, and where are you going to? And she said, From before Sarai my mistress I am fleeing. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Return to your mistress, and allow yourself to be afflicted under her hands. And the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your seed, and it will not be counted for abundance. And the angel of the Lord said to her, Behold, you will conceive and bear a son, and you shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard your affliction. And he will be a wild donkey of a man, his hand will be upon all, and everyone's hand upon him, and before all his brothers he will dwell. And she called the name of the Lord who had spoken to her, You are the God of seeing, because she said, Have I seen here also after I have seen? Therefore the well was called Be'er Lachai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and between Bered. And Hagar bore a son to Abram, and Abram named his son, whom Hagar had borne, Ishmael. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. Chapter 17. And Abram was 99 years old, and God appeared to Abram, and he said to him, I am the Almighty God, walk before me, and be perfect. And I will place my covenant between me and between you, and I will multiply you very greatly. And Abram fell upon his face, and God spoke with him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall become the father of a multitude of nations. And your name shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. And I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings will emerge from you. So there we have the conclusion of portion number 6. Quite a few things happened here. So the first is, he wants to know, how am I going to know that I'll inherit the land? And the Lord simply tells him to provide an offering. So he does. And in his sleep, he receives a vision. So in other words, he wants to know, how am I going to know? How am I going to know about this? How am I going to know that I'm really going to get this? And in exchange for making his offering, he receives a vision of sorts in his dream. The great darkness, right? And so he hears the voice of the Lord telling him, your seed will be strangers in a land that's not theirs. They will enslave them and oppress them for 400 years. And also they're going to leave. I'm going to judge that land. They're going to leave with a lot of good things. And you yourself are going to not have to deal with that. You personally are going to die peacefully and also in a good old age. What's also the specific phrase is, you will come to your forefathers in peace, right? So on the subject of what comes after death, the notion of you're coming to your forefathers. So you're following in the steps of those who come before. The big sleep is, it seems, this is a clue to the afterlife. You will come to your forefathers in peace. In other words, your forefathers will be greeting you. We can look at it in those ways as well. That is not necessarily the most important point, but it is significant to notice that this is how it's referred to as death. You will come to your forefathers. So keep that in mind as we all reach the end of our days. Beyond that, he also knows to this seed, I have given this land from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates River, and all the land inhabiting all those different people whose names end with ites, right? All the different ites of the local area. And this is where a covenant is also formed. Now, we go into chapter 16. This is all about the actual children, right? The children that he's going to have. So his wife says, I've not given you a child. I still haven't. And so here, I've got this servant who's from Egypt. You can have her, have a kid with her, and then through her, I will basically, because she's my servant, right? She will basically be a house built, or my house will be built through my servant. So Hagar becomes Abram's wife, and she does indeed conceive. Now, the problem is she stops looking at Sarai like her superior. it says she becomes unimportant in her eyes. And so this really makes Sarai angry. She gets very bitter about it. Because again, look, Hagar has basically just confirmed that her child is going to be the one to inherit all of Abram's everything, right? So that's a pretty big deal. She's now kind of the head honcho, right? She's like, my kid is going to be the one getting all this. Sarai, you're not such a big deal after all anymore. You might be the official wife of the house, but I'm the wife with the kid. So the consequences of this, Sarai does not take it well. She takes it up with Abram, and rather than fight it out with her, and kind of fall for the trap, if you will, she's trying to invoke, may the Lord judge between me and you. Abram, once again, plays a very strategic hand here. She says, may the Lord judge between me and you. Look at how she is trying to create a problem and invoking the name of the Lord to be the judge. So Abram probably recognizes in this moment the stakes are extremely high. His wife has just said, may the Lord be the judge between this dispute, right? Oh dear. I have worked over 80 years. I've been working at being the man, being righteous, doing all these things right, and now my wife is inviting a situation where I'm going to be judged. Now, another thing to consider also is he probably recognized that in regards to his wife, he did have her lie for his sake back in Egypt, right? And so if she's going to be having the Lord judge between them, he probably already knows, well, shucks, my wife, because of her, I got a bunch of treasures, and even this wife who's giving me a baby is her handmaid, so I really need to be careful here. Let's not get into that. You know what? Rather than let there be a judgment, I'm just going to hand her over to you. I'll let you two sort it out. All right, good luck. And simple as that. Let you decide what will happen. And of course, this does not end well for Hagar. She is afflicted, so maybe it's a beating, maybe she's put down. Whatever the case is, she does not get a very good treatment from Sarai because Sarai's mad. And she's like, how dare you not look at me with the same reverence you used to? How dare you see me as unimportant? And so Hagar flees. She doesn't even know where she's going. She's just getting out of there. But the angel stops her and says, no, go back. Let it happen. Let your affliction happen. You will be blessed. You will have a son who will dwell amongst his brothers. He's going to be a donkey of a man. His hand will be upon all, and everyone's hand upon him. So in other words, it's going to be constant turmoil, but he's going to be the father of a great nation, right? He will live amongst his brothers, and he will indeed be somebody of significance down the line. So despite everything, take your lickings, there will be a reward. And so she does so. And sure enough, Ishmael is born after taking the affliction, and the well is also dedicated. Now, at age 99, so first he's 86, now he's 99, so 13 years later, God appears to Abram and he says to him, I'm the Almighty God, walk before me and be perfect, and I will place my covenant between me and between you, and I will multiply you very greatly. And Abram fell upon his face. God spoke with him, saying, as for me, my covenant is with you, and you shall become the father of a multitude of nations, and your name shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, or Avraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I'll make you into nations, and kings will emerge from you. So what we get here, it's more than just the line of the one line. And again, we're going to see as we follow the line of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob down the road, not to spoil anything here in the Old Testament, in the Torah, but yes, there are more sons and descendants. But notice I'm going to make you a father of a multitude of nations. So again, yes, we may have the Torah lineage of who the Hebrews are and the Jews are, right? But he is the father of a multitude of nations. In other words, it's not going to be just the key players here. No, this man's descendants will be multitudes of nations. So I think it's significant. Remember this. It's not just a story about the line of people that go through the story of the Torah, but he has all these different nations that will be his descendants ultimately. Kings will emerge from you. Pretty powerful stuff. So again, never forget, there's not just one lineage. Just right off the bat, we've got Ishmael and his lineage, right? Keep in mind the different nations that will be sired through Abraham. 7th portion. Chapter 17, verse 7. And I will establish my covenant between me and between you and between your seed after you throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant, to be to you for a God and to your seed after you. And I will give you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, the entire land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be to them for a God. And God said to Abraham, And you shall keep my covenant, you and your seed after you, throughout their generations. This is my covenant, which you shall observe between me and between you and between your seed after you, that every male among you be circumcised. And you shall circumcise the flesh of your foreskin, and it shall be as the sign of a covenant between me and between you. And at the age of 8 days every male shall be circumcised to you throughout your generations, one that is born in the house, or one that is purchased with money from any foreigner who is not of your seed. Those born in the house and those purchased for money shall be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh as an everlasting covenant. And an uncircumcised male who will not circumcise the flesh of his foreskin, that soul will be cut off from its people. He has broken my covenant. And God said to Abraham, Your wife Sarai, you shall not call her name Sarai, for Sarah is her name. And I will bless her, and I will give you a son from her, and I will bless her, and she will become nations. Kings of nations will be from her. And Abraham fell on his face and rejoiced, and he said to himself, Will a child be born to one who is 100 years old? And will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth? And Abraham said to God, If only Ishmael will live before you. And God said, Indeed, your wife Sarah will bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac, and I will establish my covenant with him as an everlasting covenant for his seed after him. And regarding Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and I will make him fruitful, and I will multiply him exceedingly. He will beget 12 princes, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this time next year. And he finished speaking with him, and God went up from above Abraham. And Abraham took Ishmael his son, and all those born in his house, and all those purchased with his money, every male of the people of Abraham's household, and he circumcised the flesh of their foreskin on that very day, as God had spoken with him. And Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised of the flesh of his foreskin. And Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised of the flesh of his foreskin. On that very day Abraham was circumcised, and so was Ishmael his son. And all the people of his household, those born in his house, and those bought with money from foreigners, were circumcised with him. Okay, that concludes portion number 7. So here we learn the details of the covenant. The big one, okay? This is the covenant of Abraham. This is the one where Abraham learns the truth of, or rather discovers, what must be done is the circumcision. This is the foundation of where the circumcision comes from in Judaica. And it is the Brit Milah, the covenant with the Lord. And all among the house of Abraham will do it as well. Every man, whether he is born to you or purchased for money. So even if it's someone that you bought as a servant, you got to circumcise him. That is the deal. This is a sign of the covenant, and if you don't do this, you'll be cut off from the people. So spiritually speaking, this is extremely important. This is you opting in to the covenant of Abraham to go forward with a circumcision. Now, also with Sarah, we hear this. Sarah is now her name. She will become mother of nations. Kings of nations will be from her. And specifically, that her line with Isaac will be the one that receives the covenant, or the, if you will, this sort of a blessing from heaven deal, this covenant of things. Ishmael's going to receive one too. His is different. He is going to receive a blessing. He is going to receive a great many nations. He will be somebody significant. But even though he'll be made into a great nation, the covenant is going to follow the line of Isaac. Now, some might question, why is this so? Why is the covenant of Abraham not inherited by Ishmael, but by Isaac? Now, of course, if you are a believer, you don't really need to question the reason why. You're like, well, that's just what God said so. That's it. But for those who want to speculate, I do have a secular answer to this question. And it has a lot to do with the hegemony of kings and the succession, as well as the ascension of a man from one level to another. So I'm going to go to the Persians here, because they are a great example of people who had many, many children, but only one possible guarantee. Who's going to be the successor when the king of Persia moves on generationally? So you'd think it'd be the firstborn son, just like in this case, you'd think it'd be Ishmael. However, there's a significant difference between when Ishmael is born and when his next son will be born. Ishmael was born to Abram. Isaac is born to Abraham. Abram versus Avraham. In other words, this covenant, which is forged with this circumcision, this covenant didn't exist when Ishmael was born, nor did Avraham exist when Ishmael was born. But from here on, now Abraham, this is the covenant of Abraham, his son, his firstborn son, Abraham's firstborn son is Isaac. Significant. Back to the Persian example. Darius the Great of Persia. He was not a son of Cyrus. Cyrus the Great had his son, I believe, Cambyses, and then following Cambyses and all the drama around that, Darius ascended the throne. Darius had children already, but when he became the king of Persia, suddenly his very essence was considered to be greater, right? Because when you're the king, you're a special guy. When he was not yet the king, he wasn't that special guy. He wasn't a prince, he was just a guy. But then when he became the king, suddenly any children born after that are the son born to a king. His other children before then were not born to a king, but his next generation is born to a king. So that is the significance here in the secular context. Ishmael was born to Abram, and he is absolutely promised a big success as a head of a family, head of a nation. He will be made into a mighty nation. However, he was born to Abram, not Abraham. Isaac is born to Abraham. So I think that is really the significance of this moment. After he's born, or rather after Abraham is anointed and given this name, that is when he is born. So that is one of the reasons that Isaac will be the inheritor. Also because Sarah gets her own name change as well, and she will be blessed. So Isaac is not born to Sarai. Isaac will be born to Sarah. Right? Again, very significant. And this is really an entire cultural identity and a change and a blessing. You know, we'll see that when people's names get changed like this, it does create a whole new blessing on them. So by being named Sarai, her name meant one thing. But by being named Sarah, her very name carries a blessing, which now even is probably why she's able to conceive. In other words, the method that the mystical powers of God have, through the power of a name, the ability to give blessings, right? And so we'll hear about this again later when we hear about the story of Jacob, who becomes Israel, right? Because he gets a blessing, his name changes. So Abram becomes Abraham, Avraham, he becomes a totally different guy in terms of his entire destiny changes when his name is given. Likewise, Sarai, by becoming Sarah, now she's going to be the mother of a great people. She will be the mother of nations. Kings of nations will be born from Sarah, not Sarai, Sarah. So this is a clue at the importance of a name. Also another thing, the names of Ishmael and the names of Isaac are both given not by the parents. In both of these cases, observe, the names Ishmael and Isaac come from above. In other words, their names carry their destinies. their names reflect what they were born through, the experiences, right? And that tends to be a tradition with a lot of Hebrew naming, and also in other languages as well. You'll see people name based on what happened when the child was born or the circumstances of whatever. In this case, these names were destiny being handed to them. Ishmael will be this, and his name will be Ishmael. This is not Hagar's idea. This is not Abram's idea. This is an idea from heaven. Isaac. No, that is not the parent's idea. That is a name given by God himself. Your child will be named Isaac, and you shall name him Isaac. That's it. He's decreeing it. The Lord is decreeing it as a law. Your wife will bear you a son, and you shall name him Isaac. Not, think of a good name. No, you're going to name him Isaac. So the importance of a name cannot be understated. The importance of a name, and again, the source of the name. Where do these names come from? Abram was named by his father, presumably, just as Sarai was named by her parents. But the name Avraham is God-given. Sarah is God-given. Abram and Sarai are not. Necessarily. But definitively, their new names are sacred. They're names given by the divine creator himself. So, if anything was powerful in this entire Torah portion, I think that might be the most significant, because the name Avraham is where we establish this hegemony of the covenant. Because it's the covenant of Avraham, not the covenant of Abram. It's the covenant of Avraham. By making this testament of your own will, thinking of it from a context of you're harming your body, you're physically mutilating yourself by cutting off any part of your body, but by making this personal sign of a covenant, that is what is given, the blessing of being Avraham, as well as all the descendants. It is that significant of a ritual, that significant of an event, and one of the most important commandments of the Hebrew nation. So with that, I think we can go ahead and wrap up this week's Torah portion. That was Lech Lecha, or go, or to go forth. And we have gone forth through all 7 portions, and I hope we took away quite a bit from this. I certainly did, and I really, as you notice, I got very impassioned about the naming thing. Like, that's just such a big deal, but names are important. They really are. I mean, to be given a name by a spiritual deity, think about, what a blessing. Think of like when the king gives you the title of Sir. That's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, you just got from the king or the queen. They just told you are Sir so-and-so. Wow, what an honor. Thank you for the title. Amazing. And also, one more thing, I brought it up earlier, but this is the covenant between Abraham and the Lord, but that doesn't mean no one else out there believes in this Lord. After all, the king of Salem or Salem also was a priest of the Most High God. And also, I think, I keep extending it, right? But again, Most High God. What does that mean? Most High implies that there is a hierarchy, right? The phrasing, Most High, the most High God, meaning that he's above all else. Keep that in mind. The language is very significant. The presence or the existence of other entities is not denied. But it's that this God is the highest. This is the Most High God. So, if you've ever thought about the existence of other deities or other beings beyond the mortal plane, this might be a good example of a clue. Most High God. Not the only God. The Most High God. And the only God that Abraham will worship. Baruch Hashem. That brings us to the end, for real this time. Thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear what you had to say. If you want to leave any kind of feedback, please do so. And let me know what you thought of this week's portion, your own interpretations, or any of the things I've said. This is just really powerful stuff. I know Genesis, for me, is arguably the most powerful and significant of the 5 books of the Torah, because it is the origin, the foundations. It is Genesis, right? The creation process. To me, all this history that comes into explaining what comes later, it's also condensed. It's just the one book of Genesis. It's not that long of a book, and it's got all these years and generations of information. So what little is there is extremely important. You have to really, really figure it out. Like, what does it really mean? So Genesis, to me, is just the most exciting. I really, really like Genesis a lot. But anyway, that's all for me. This has been Shmuel Moshe with the Weekly Parashahcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. With love and appreciation in my heart, I hope to see you next time. I hope you'll tune in, and I hope you will join me as we continue to study Torah. Baruch Hashem.